Loud. Yeah. Tonja, I am so excited to welcome you to the Aim from the Heart podcast. I became familiar with Tonja's work actually in real life. We first intersected in the real world, not through the internet, as like most people I meet is from the internet. But it was actually an ad for this class that you were sharing in Denver at a park, which was about trees and about tree wisdom. And I picked up a little flyer for it at the apothecary around this lovely herbal shop in Denver. And, and I just felt called to it. It was really fascinating. And so I came to that class and it was a beautiful class. And I loved the wisdom that you shared of it. And that's when I became introduced to your work. And I then, looked you up and found what you shared on Instagram and also on Etsy, the things that you offer there. And so Tonja is, how would you describe what it is that you do and what you offer? I'm always like, it's so interesting to me, like, what do we call this?
Right, exactly. Well, I think first and foremost, I'm a herbalist. That's probably the only title I really like to claim.
Mm.
I mean, we're entrepreneurs. We do it our own way, and so we juggle so many different hats. I have an MBA, so I'm a herbalist with an MBA, which is an interesting
Mm.
combination. And I've been living part-time in Ireland, which is my heritage. And so so for 20 years, I've been very much intrigued in my roots and where I've come from. And so all of my teachings, from my herbal teachings to my mystery school, to priestess school, has all been rooted in the Irish wisdom tradition.
Mm. And so what I love about your work and what I just like immediately sort of connected to was this idea of going back to your roots, right? And connecting with your root traditions. And, I was obviously living in America at the time when I connected with you. I'm Scottish by birth. I was born in Scotland and all my family are Scottish. We've just discovered some Irish, a little bit of Irish in
Uh, yeah,
my
they're so close. Yeah, I have some
but,
Scottish too. I have
oh
quite a
yeah,
bit of Scottish actually
you
as
do, yeah.
well, but yeah.
And I think for many years, like I didn't really acknowledge my heritage. It's just like you're living in this modern world and it's like, whatever. But
Yeah.
increasingly it's become like a question, like, what are the roots? And what I'm interested about with your work, and I'm really curious about your own story as to how you came to reconnect with your Irish roots. Like, did you have, like, were you brought up, very consciously within Irish traditions, or was this something, and where are you from in America? Were you born in America, or do you mind me, like a story? I'd
Yeah,
love to know about you and how you sort of like did connect with those roots.
sure. I grew up in Ohio, in the United States, and I grew up on a farm, so I felt very connected to trees always, especially oak trees. Um, Although my family was not like, we did not practice any Irish traditions growing up. And I mean, I don't even know that they had really talked about our Irish roots. In fact, my maiden name is Klein, which is very German. So, if anything, like, it was more about the German side, which is, and then when you get the DNA test, I have very, very little German. So it's almost like from a very young age, and no one else in my family, I have two sisters, they weren't really interested. That I would read like any novel I could get my hands on about Ireland, and just felt a really deep connection, not knowing where it came from, and also just allowing it and honoring it, even at a young age as a teenager. And then when I think back, I'm like, it might have been the trees, like they were calling me, because oak is a very important tree in Ireland in the Irish wisdom tradition. And then Bridget, who is the Irish goddess and a saint, it's who I'm a devotee of. Um, her, that's a very important tree for her. And so I like to think it was like the trees were literally taking me back to my roots. And then I did not even come to Ireland until I was in my late 20s or early 30s. And I was with my partner at the time, and we took a bike tour around the Ring of Kerry, which is in the West here in Ireland. And I just remember and I had a corporate job that I had quit. And so I felt really disengaged with like my spiritual body. Yet in that trip, it was such an awakening, and I recognized people. I'm like, I know these people, even though I'd never been to Ireland before. But there was a deep familiarity with this land and the people here. And then I just needed to come back, and I've pretty much been back ever since. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. And so when you started to come back there, just in terms of like connecting with Bridget, for instance, was that something had that already happened? Or was that
No.
something?
Yeah, again. So I came back after that time in Europe. We spent some time in Ireland and then a lot of time in Western Europe in general. And then I came back and thought I was going to get a corporate job again. And after experience like that, I was like, there's no way I can go back into that environment. And so I was going through my mail at the time, piles of mail, because we were gone like 3 months, going through my mail. And I found this brochure from a herb school in Boulder. I was living in Denver at the time, so Boulder's really close to Denver. And I was like, oh, if I could do anything, like that would be my dream. That would be my dream, to go to herb school. Even though I think I had like a cup of chamomile tea, And again, that was very just deep listening on my part. I had grown a herb garden in one of our first houses that we owned. I created a herb garden and love them. Felt like they were talking to me, even though I didn't grow up with herbs. I grew up on a farm, so I grew up, close to the land and nature. But we didn't grow up drinking herbs. So yeah, and then I was like, oh, I can do this. Yes, this is my dream. I can make my dream happen. So I enrolled in herb school in Boulder. And it was beautiful. I feel like I definitely found what I was meant to be doing. And after that year was done, we could have continued. It was like a 3-year program. Although I just knew there was another direction I wanted. I didn't want to be a clinical herbalist, and that was very much a clinical program. So I was in a checkout line, what's Whole Foods today, because Whole Foods has thought the world is around natural food stores in the States anyway. So it was called the Ideal Market at the time. So I was in Capitol Hill, which we met very close to there. And so I literally this was 22 years ago, and I opened the back of this herb magazine as I'm waiting to check out, and I see a tiny little classified ad in the back. And I hadn't even bought this herb magazine. I just saw it. It said, "Come study herbs in Ireland." I was like, that's it. I want to come study herbs in Ireland. And again, I didn't, I emailed her. I don't even think she had a website at the time. And her school was here in Ireland, was Bridget's Academy, and it still is Bridget's Academy of Healing Arts. So I came here again on a wing and a prayer, and my partner came and he was like, are you sure she even exists? So it was all this trust. We came 2 months with the school in residence with her. And that's when I got to know Bridget through the school. And it was it was just south of Dublin. So it was really close to Kildare, which Kildare is means, translated in Irish, means Church of the Oak. So again, that oak tree rooted connection. And that's how I became acquainted with Bridget. And then spent actually she invited us to stay an additional month. My teacher, her name's Gina McGarry, and she's still a beloved. She is my teacher in this life. And so just living in this place that had so much connection to Bridget, is how my connection with Bridget started. And Bridget was, we wouldn't have called, like, Herbalist is a very modern name. Like, even I can still meet people in Ireland and I'll say I'm a herbalist and they'll be like, what is that? So we were known as like Bon Fashes, or sometimes people with the cure is what they would have been referred to. And people ask me that often. Oh, so you have the cure. Um, yeah. So
So amazing. What I love in this story is just the trusting in your soul and in the callings, and then
mhm.
receiving those little confirmations, like the name of the place that's like that. Ah, yes, I'm on the right path. And
Yeah.
just I said to Tonja just before we started, and this wasn't, I didn't actually stage manage this. This was not like I put these out because I was about to have this conversation. I have my Bridget cards here, which Tonja made, and these are my favorite oracle cards. I have a lot of different oracle cards, and I can't explain my connection and devotion and absolute love of these, but I take them with me everywhere. And as you know, I've purchased quite a few of them because I usually end up giving them to somebody.
Uh-huh.
And then I need another set. And
Mhm.
they're just so you wrote these yourself, or I imagine sort of channeled the messages on them.
Mhm.
I would just offer to anybody, if you're looking for just like the most simple but like succinct and beautiful cards to anchor in with your daily life, these are the ones. They're Bridget cards, and we'll make sure that we've got your links and things that people can find them. I'm tempted to just like pull a card for us now, like just out of interest. Like
Sure,
I
let's
do
do
these all
it.
the time. I mean, I'm literally like every day. I tend to pull a card every morning for myself from the
Yes.
I've got lots of different decks. I use different decks for different things, but there's something about these that just I like the size of them. I'm gonna just offer.
Yeah.
They're smaller than a lot of oracle cards. A lot of them are very big. And I just like I
Mhm.
like the size, and I just like the simplicity of them and just the way they are. And I am just gonna see what comes for us just now as we are speaking. Goddess of poetry for a creative life. I should have my glasses. I'm like,
I know. That's it. They're tiny.
I know. I'm
The
like, where
front is
are my
pretty
glasses?
shiny.
No, it's
That's okay.
I've suddenly turned that corner with my eyesight, and
I
it's not very
know.
recently I really didn't need them, but I'm suddenly like, I really actually do need my glasses.
Yeah.
Ancient bards of Ireland invoked Bridget to implore their words. Is that correct? Inspire their words. Today she is a muse for all creative works. Where in your life would you like to be more creative? Make a decision. And this is what I love, the little questions, little prompts, the little thoughts that really do
Mhm.
guide me like so much. I can't tell you, I just love them.
Yeah.
Where in your life would you like to be more creative? Make a decision to start a creative endeavor like journaling, spinning wool, making jewelry, or creating art. Take time today and every day to nurture the creative aspect of yourself. Call upon Bridget for inspiration. Allow your creative works to ignite the spark of your true self. You're creative. And I love the affirmations at the end of each one. So every single one has like an affirmation. When I had a screenwriters retreat here in Spain, I offered like each of the women to choose a card, and they all chose it and they kept their cards, and each of them got like
Yeah.
the card, like they just like got exactly the right card. I mean,
Yeah.
there was so many tears because it was just like, that's like speaking right to my heart. That's exactly what I
Yeah.
needed today. And there's just something in these that's, I don't know, that's really magic. I also
Yeah.
here have the Bridget oil, which again, I didn't stage manage this. I use this, I anoint this often. Usually when I'm about to teach, usually when I like really want to like bring in a certain energy into what I'm doing. And I don't know, I don't think it's available right now on your site.
No, yeah,
And
yeah,
the tea
it's
as well. So this is just a little request.
thank
Just a
you.
little just a little
Yeah.
request. You might want to consider bringing them back. The
Okay,
tea as
thanks.
well. The ritual tea. Oh my gosh, I love the
Mhm.
ritual tea and the different seasonal teas.
Yeah, good.
So
Glad.
good. So
Yeah,
appreciated. I mean, you really
yeah.
are just an incredible herbalist. Your work though goes beyond. I mean, it's interesting because like I see you as being a priestess, and you might not use that word for yourself, I see you as being a witch. And again, you
Mhm.
might not use that word yourself, and you might be like, why
Mhm.
is she saying these things? I see you as a woman on this path, connected to land, connected to honoring Mother Earth, the goddess. And I think it's this, when I met you, I was just so inspired by that, by meeting a woman who was just like embodying this path in a way that felt so real. I'm getting tearful, like this,
Mm.
that felt
Yeah.
like so real, and so like I can feel someone's embodiment, that you're living what you're teaching. And there's a lot of sort of performative, I feel like, I don't know, in our world right now, these things like being a
Yeah.
witch, being a priestess, these are, they're quite, they can be quite Instagram fashionable at the moment, like quite a
Absolutely.
trend.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of there's a lot of a business around it, you
Yeah.
know uh,
Mhm.
which I don't think is a bad thing, because it feels like to me a renaissance of something that's so important, that's like a reawakening of something that matters so
Yeah.
much. So
Mhm.
I'm definitely not sort of like saying that's a bad thing, but what I felt when I met you is something just like that's like you're living this, like you're walking this walk, and it's
Mhm.
deep, it's deep roots. There's
Mhm.
also, actually, I just like to acknowledge as well, your book about Irish roots. Do you have one book or more than one?
Um, Basically just that. Yeah. Yeah. I would like
Yeah.
an art book, but yeah,
Okay.
Wild Irish
The
Roots
Irish
is what
roots,
it's
yeah,
called.
which
Yeah.
I have a copy of, and I've also I sent to a friend recently who has Irish heritage and was going to Ireland for the first time,
Mm.
and she's a woman in her 60s, and I felt like
Aw.
she would just love that. Can you speak of, like, as an American, reconnecting with these roots, what that's meant for you, and what that has brought out in your life?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that. So yeah, when I was here, going back 22 years ago, when I was here spending that time with Gina, um, it was really fascinating because I felt like I was finally walking into something that was mine. Um, and as far as like I'm not Native American. I grew up in the United States of America in the colony, the colonizer, mentality. And this wasn't even really talked about that much 22 years ago. All of these things now, it's so great. Like you said, with priestess and with witch, we're reclaiming these, and we're recognizing the damage that we have done, and the co-opting that we have done, not only damage, but also taken a lot from the Native American people, both spiritually and claimed it as our own from a herbal perspective. So when I came to Ireland, it was so fascinating because I felt like I was finally able to tap into my own traditions and my own um rituals and herbs. Like I just knew when I met nettle, I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is a herb, and Gina probably told me, this is a herb that has been nourishing your DNA for since we
Mm.
were formed. Like my people have been in the States since they came in famine times, at least my ancestors from Ireland. So 150 years that I've been on the soil of the United States of America. But before that, like everything was nourished by this land. And so the Irish were so into Native American spirituality. Like I felt like everywhere we went, it was all about the Native American spirituality, which is beautiful because it is a beautiful tradition. And also I think it was because the Native American tradition, I mean, it had been a living tradition for a very long time until we came as colonizers and started co-opting it and started suppressing it. Whereas in the Irish tradition, we had been colonized by England for about 900 years. And so there was so many things that had been lost or forgotten or couldn't have been practiced because we would have been put to death or penalized, greatly by the British. And so I was so fascinated by that. I'm like, I am here on this land that is so rich with heritage, and they're all into the Native American tradition. So I was very like intrigued by that, and definitely was even more compelled to really dig deeper into the traditions and rituals, the year, the agricultural year, the astrological year that I know that my ancestors followed, to work with the herbs. And then then I made the decision, as I grew my herbal practice, I only wanted to deal with herbs of Western Europe, the land where I was nurtured from. A lot of, when I was in herb school, we were talking a lot about Chinese herbs, which I always thought was like kind of weird. I'm like, Chinese herbs, like, and that again is because there was records kept, so it's an amazing, traditional Chinese medicine is an amazing healing system. But I'm a white body from the West, not, a brown body from the East. So, and not that they can't be effective. Um, so yeah, like literally just coming back to like what has nourished me, and letting that lead the way. So yeah, it's interesting because after you've been doing your work for a while, and we get to be a certain age, and all of a sudden these things like well, I'm just seeing it come around, even the reclaiming of the witch, and this is something that I'm not doing it because it's trendy. This is something that the land and the herbs and my teachers have shared. Um,
It's
yeah.
beautiful. And this is why, I mean, this is why I value your work so much, and I just like honor it so much, because I mean, for me, it's funny. I spent years, as a spiritual seeker, and I'm from Scotland. All my family is Scottish. Basically, I was born there. I lived there till I was 6, and when I was 6, we moved to Japan. And then after a number of years, like 6 years in Japan, we moved to Australia, and then after that to Germany. So I grew up like really all over the place.
Yeah.
And when I came back to Scotland when I was 18, I felt very disconnected from it. It's like very challenging, because I just like I said I was Scottish, but everyone would be like, you're not Scottish, right? And I was like, yeah, you're kind of right.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I didn't feel connected to it. And as I was always a spiritual seeker, so then I sort of found my way to Buddhism, and
Mhm.
in particular to Thich Nhat Hanh, who and yoga as well became a big part of my life. And I spent time in India studying yoga, but Thich Nhat Hanh became my biggest teacher, and I spent a lot of time at his monasteries. And
Yeah.
Thich Nhat Hanh would often say, "Don't be a Buddhist. Go back to your own roots.
Yeah.
Like, go to your own roots." And
Mhm.
it used to really piss me off, because, like, as far as I could understand it, my roots were the Scottish Presbyterian Church,
Yeah.
right? And I was like,
Mhm.
I just don't like feel good there, right? Like I don't like it's no, I
Yeah.
just don't like everything in me for some reason. And I was brought up, my parents are part of the church, and no disrespect to the church, but it just for some reason
Yeah.
never felt like my home. I did not feel like this was it. And like, so when Thich Nhat Hanh would say this, I would be like, no, because I don't want those.
Yeah.
And it wasn't really until very recent years. And I also had that thing about sort of like, oh, Celtic mythology and all this. Like, it's all about like, like it's it's the Dungeons and
Yes.
Dragons squad, right?
I know.
Aesthetically, right?
Yes, yes.
Like, I reject it.
Yes.
Like, I'm too
Uh-huh.
cool for that, right? And that's what I sort of got, like about like, so it's either like Scottish Presbyterian Church or it's like Dungeon and Dragon
This,
Squad. And I'm
yeah.
like, I don't like, no, right? Like, let me just do my
Uh-huh.
Buddhist thing and my yoga thing. And
Uh-huh.
and that feels much better to me. And I get to pick and choose the things that I like of those traditions,
Yeah. Mhm.
and honor them. And and so I carried on around the world. And really, it's just in very recent years, first of all, that I became aware what was meant by my roots, and this is that
Mhm.
interesting thing, when you said like the Irish were disconnected from their traditions 900 years ago. And
Mhm.
as a Scottish person, I feel this like
Yeah.
really powerfully now too. And I'm like,
Yeah.
and I feel like I'm in this process. I feel like I'm at an earlier stage in it than you are, of connecting to the roots. And I think that's why I feel so drawn to your work and to what you do,
Mhm.
because I think you illustrate a path home.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
that for me, for so many years, I just felt like, yeah, like Like first, the roots, I don't know that they weren't mine, but now I understand why, because they weren't. You know,
Yeah,
they were
exactly.
colonized. They were the
Yeah,
colonized.
absolutely. Yeah.
And so I didn't feel at home with them because they're not actually the
Hmm.
real roots. And going back to the mother, going to the goddess, going back, like really anchoring in, like you say, to the times of the year. It's a whole other thing. But I still feel fairly new to it. I'm just wondering if anyone is listening to this just now and they are not connected to their roots at all. And I know that we'll have a lot of American listeners. What advice would you give somebody on this journey? Is it
Yeah.
necessary to like actually go to the place, or what do you think?
No, definitely it's not necessary. In fact, I consider that a lot, that I'm very privileged that I can live. I mean, I'm pretty much living full time in Ireland now. Although my primary audience, I mean, I learn a lot being here, and I think, as an Irish diaspora, I didn't grow up here, so I bring a perspective that a lot of Americans, or because so many Americans are of the Irish or Scottish diaspora. And and two, I mean, I love that Thich Nhat Hanh said that. A lot of the elder teachers of tradition, Native American teachers, have said that. Go, you can receive the teachings, and it's not like we don't feel bad. I was way into Buddhism for a while too, because it just felt really accessible, and it was something that was outside the dogma and the institution
Mhm.
of the only spiritual practice that was accessible in the States. So yeah, so receiving these, they can be like whatever paths you have been on. It's not to reject those, it's to like integrate those into what is your own. And I think um we were so the Scottish and Irish. So the Scottish and Irish definitely, and like they're Celtic. We have Celtic roots, and we have different. I don't want to get too much depth into like the history of all of that. And as Celtic people, we were very connected to the seasons, and even before that. So we were connected to the seasons pre-Christianity, and then even before that, the stone circles and the Neolithic sites, the sacred sites, which are, I've been to many in Scotland. There, I live around them here. I take people to these places when they are, fortunate enough to be able to walk on this land, and you don't need to. My point is just like, even before the Celtic people, there were pre Celtic traditions that were seasonal and astrological as well. So, bringing us back to the solstices and the equinoxes. And then the seasonal festivals, which the Celtic people brought, are agricultural because they were farmers. And so we call those Samhain, which we're approaching Samhain, which is the season of winter, and it's also known as the Irish and Celtic New Year. And it's also a time, it's ancestor reverence. So we look at like Day of the Dead. And I think a lot of Americans are very intrigued by that. And a lot of people in general. I mean, it's a beautiful, again, a very living tradition. And we have our own ancestral reverence, and we make traditional foods on this time, around this time, and leave a plate for the ancestors. So I would say, if anyone is intrigued to start searching, delving deeper into their own roots, um you definitely do not need to be able to visit the land. You don't even need to like know that what your DNA is, like if you are, because I mean, I knew I had Irish Scottish roots, but I wasn't doing a DNA test. I was just deep listening. Um, and then when you have like a Buddhist goddess or god that you're intrigued with, maybe just reach out to a teacher. I don't know if you can Google it. I try to keep my students away from Google but I know that it's a starting point anyway. And ask, because like if there is a Buddhist god or goddess, there is one in the Irish mythology. So just kind of weaving in and being curious about, oh, well, I love this practice in whatever tradition it might be, even in Christianity, you know, especially in Ireland, just because we used Catholicism as a way to rebel against England, because England was so Protestant, that we like being Catholic was one way that we could, you know, be a rebel.
Yes.
And I mean, it did not turn out the greatest. And a lot of so for instance, Samhain is like the pre-Christian festival. But then a lot of the Christian festivals align with our pre-Christian festivals.
They
you know?
hijacked them. They hijacked
Yes,
them.
they did. So just being curious around like the festivals that you like, you know, and be like, oh, I wonder what link that might have to, you know, the Celtic calendar. Yeah. So I guess curiosity and just remembering. And I've had students take my classes who have been like brought up Buddhist in the Buddhist mythology, and they were like, I had no idea that like we have so many stories and so many goddesses and invocations, and you know, as rich as the Buddhist tradition, as rich as, and not to, I mean, those are all beautiful traditions, the Native American tradition, of course. And it is that digging a little deeper, because yeah, I love that you gave that example about, you know, oh, I saw the Scottish Presbyterian Church, which is like one of the cold, I don't know, for me, the cold, sterile, like
It's pretty cold.
Yeah.
It's pretty cold. I mean, you go into the Scottish church, it's just like, it is bare. I mean, there's just like nothing, you know, like
nothing.
at least you go into a Catholic church and they've got some incense going.
Right, exactly.
Candles and incense and like,
I know.
A little bit of like, I don't know, theater and fun going on.
Yes.
Heaven forbid.
Nope. Yeah, so it is digging a little deeper, because and that's part of the magic, I think, too, that it's not, you know, and it's becoming like there's a renaissance right now in Ireland and probably in Scotland. I don't know, because I don't live in Scotland, and that's, you know, Ireland is you know, where I learn and study. But there is a renaissance right now around, you know, there's so many people in the past 5 years. There's a lot of Irish people that are really when I first started talking about Samhain and Imbolc, and you know,
got a little fella.
Can you fix this? I can't.
Sorry about this. This is
right.
Like, I don't know, dear. I don't know why you can't. Your battery's about to die anyway. So we can't do it.
Fix it.
Can't do it. Sorry. John too.
Bless. The gifts of working at home, you know, the gifts and the challenges.
I know. It is what it is, because my husband's going out with my older son, so I'm just here with him, and I said, I'll just be an hour and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
So he's so sweet.
He is so patient.
So yes, I've seen that renaissance too. Well, something that, you know, and I would love to hear about your perspective on this as a woman, and you know, and I don't know much about the Irish history, but in Scotland, obviously, the witch trials were a massive thing.
Yeah.
Right? And you know, and I grew up totally with that thing. For instance, there was a drive that we took often. I was born in Dumfries, but my parents were really from Edinburgh, so we used to drive all the time from Dumfries to Edinburgh. Dumfries is down in the south, near the borders, and we used to drive all the time up there. And there was a town that you go through, Carlops, and it's got this very steep cliff there, you know, big sort of rocky cliff face, and you know, it would always be pointed out, and it's like that's where they used to shove witches off the top of that. And if they, you know, if they died, then they were considered to be a good Christian woman and they were buried in the church, and otherwise they were burned at the stake, right? And you know, and I grew up with like also that thing, you know, like you were always pointed out these places, right, that there was like this history of witches. Now, you know, as a young girl, like I didn't really, you know, it's just like, this is just our history, this is our world, right? And it was always the witches, like the, you know, witches were burned here, witches were burned there. I have really like become sort of like a little bit, I don't know, like the whole witch thing has become a big thing for me. I think because I really recognize the extent, and I work with a lot of creative women. And I just see again and again that pattern of women being afraid to speak out, wondering why they feel afraid to let their voice be heard, like why they're self-sabotaging their work, they're trying to write, but they have a block and all this kind of thing. And I really feel like so much of it is not really just about them and their life, but this heritage that we have. Because for me as a Scottish woman, I'm like, we had over 300 years of this. Like, it's not like 5 years of this. If we think about epigenetics and what it's taught us about how it affected people within the Holocaust, and that was one generation, that was like one period of time. But we're talking about like over 300 years. That's, like 10 generations of women or something, with the life expectancy then, of women living in fear for their lives, of like the trauma of that, of their mothers or their sisters or their friends being treated like this. And I just wonder, I don't know in Ireland what that history is, but if that has shaped or impacted sort of your work or how you see what you're doing now. Because obviously you would actually, if you were in Scotland back in the day, you would probably been burned at the stake for what you do.
Yeah.
Definitely. I don't know what it was like in Ireland, as I say, but Scotland, I don't think you would have got out alive doing what you did.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I totally agree. Like what we have held in the memory of our bodies, the memory of our DNA too, it's profound, and how it is affects us as we are reclaiming like our place and our power as women, or people who identify as women in this world. um and it is interesting because, and I'll just rewind a little. Like, witch is a term again, and you said this. I mean, yeah, I'm a witch, although I really wouldn't. I really, and I say it very kind of nonchalant because again, it's not like a title. It's not, I don't need to be like I'm a witch, because it does. It feels a little performative, and it feels also like yeah, trendy along with the performative, and I think it's powerful. It's powerful to know our history, know where we've come from. And so what really turned the point for me in claiming myself as a witch, because I didn't want to claim it just because it's trendy. And, even though like, yeah, herbalists and women who are connected with the land and, yeah. So there's a book we read in my mystery school, and it's by an Irish woman, and her name is Mary Condron, Condron. And she actually is hugely influential. She's still living, but in making Bridget's Day. So Bridget, we've been talking about Bridget, Irish goddess and saint, and it is now a bank holiday. It became a bank holiday in Ireland just this year. So again, and this is a big part of reclaiming the feminine as well. Like Bridget was a very powerful figure in her day. Although not powerful in like a way of like hierarchical. It was just like she had an audience with bishops, and she might have been a bishop. There's stories that she might have been a bishop as well. She was a magic maker. She tended to a sacred flame that was magically kept alit. So she could have been a witch as well, And so Mary Cauldron wrote this book called Serpent and the Goddess. And I was I think I was just like flipping through it, and someone wanted me to teach a class about with witch in the title, and I was so resistant because I'm like, I'm not just gonna like cave into this trendy thing, and I read this excerpt about what Mary Cauldron, who is a scholar, an Irish scholar, very connected to Bridget, and but also is a nun, so also very connected to the Christian mythology. And she had wrote that a witch is a person, I don't know if she said woman, a person who is accountable to her community and listens to the oracles of the plants and the stars and the moon and the rivers. I'm like, oh, okay. I guess I am a witch. I am accountable to my community. And then also in Ireland, we um Kalyak is a word that is often used to describe a witch. And also it's a wise woman, and the land we refer to as the Kalyak often. And Kalyak is also very that's the same word in Scottish. And I
It
don't know if
is.
the
Yeah,
mythology
it
is
is.
exactly the same. Um but so an elderly woman who is sovereign is the Kalyak. And so a sovereign woman. So I think it's all amazing that we're really looking at reclaiming that. Um, and interestingly, this goes back to the Protestant versus the Catholic, because in Ireland, there no women were persecuted. No one was burned. There was a woman I just recently, yeah, I know. Isn't it amazing? There was someone, and I feel like people always want to like find a story to be like, yes, there was. So there's this gentleman who he's not really a scholar, but he's like, maybe he would be an amateur scholar. I really respect him. And he recently named this woman who had been burned at the stake. I had never even heard of her before, and I've done a lot of research around it. But this was even before the witch trials. This was like the 12th century, and the witch
Yeah,
trials were later. So I
yeah,
feel like people are really trying to find an example, but that's
yeah.
just, it did not, so the Catholics were kind of, you know, had a lot of pre-Christian, I don't use the word pagan that much, but they knew like how important these connections were to the land and the cosmos and the plants. And they might not have revered, but if there was an old woman that lived, and the witches in Ireland, the witches, the Calyaks, the hags, the crones, we also, another word we use for this type of woman or person is Bonfasha. So a Bonfasha would like live on the verges, and she would be accountable to her community. And also she would be like separate from her community. And a really great story in Ireland, and this is from the 19th century, of a Bonfasha, of a witch, her name, and she lived just really close to where I live in County Clare. Her name is Biddy Early, and she had this cure. She had a cure, and the cure was that, well, she was a herbalist, so she used herbs as a cure. And she also had this mystical blue bottle, and it was said that the fairies gave her this blue bottle, and this blue bottle had an elixir of some sort in it that could heal any remedy, or could heal any issue, along with the herbs. And so it was said that the priest would like preach against Biddy Early. Do not go see Biddy Early. Works with the devil, or whatever they would say. The doctors would be like, she's a quack. She doesn't know. And then the story is that they would be in disguise in the queue to get in to get Biddy Early's healing remedy.
I love that.
So that's like so
Oh
much
my
of the
gosh.
Irish. That's so much of the
Yes.
Irish. Like,
This is
no,
so
but
fascinating to me. I mean, I'm
yeah.
really like surprised because I mean, in Scotland, as you know,
Yeah.
I mean, and I
Oh,
feel
it was
like
horrific.
it's horrific. This summer,
Yeah.
when I was back in North Berwick, which is where my parents live now, it's about 30 minutes outside of Edinburgh on the coast. And they had this beautiful, they've got all these like boxes, planters in the town. It's a tiny little town. It's like, 20,000 people or something. And it's like Toy Town. It's so idyllic. I mean, it's so
Yeah.
lovely.
Right.
It's just like, it's just so sweet. But they had all these planters, and they had this sign up about it explaining why these particular plantings. They had these black petunias in it, and then a lot
Oh,
of
wow.
herbs. And
Uh,
the signs were about the fact that this was to commemorate the 78 women who were executed there around 1509, right, in North Berwick, right? And I thought, 78, like, like, just, I mean, when you hold that for a second, you think this town today is like 20,000 people. And if you killed
Yeah.
78
Oh,
women
yeah.
in that town today, that would traumatize the whole town for like generations. I mean, you can't even fathom it. 78 women, like, take them
Right.
today and murder them,
Yeah.
right? And you go, but this was like, I mean, back then, I can't imagine the population of the town was more than like 1,000,
Yeah, exactly.
or a couple of thousand. And it was a pilgrimage stop, resting space. And most
Mhm.
of these women worked as healers to pilgrims,
Oh my gosh.
right? They were
Wow.
they were herbalists, and
Yes.
they cared for their community. And
Uh-huh.
this was what happened, was they were accused of, it was accused of witchcraft, and it spread
Uh-huh.
like wildfire around the women, and they executed 78 of them
Oh
in this
my
town. And
God.
so in these planters, they had planted what they said with the herbs that these women would have grown, the herbs that they,
Oh,
and it did feel like this kind of, I don't know, it feels, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this, like this time that we're living in,
mhm.
right? I mean, it feels to me like it's a shift. Like there's,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, just that they're doing that. That's like amazing. I mean, the black petunias
yeah,
and also the herbs and really and that there were 78 planters. Like, yeah, it's amazing for sure. There and I feel like with with any trauma, cultural trauma, because this was a cultural trauma,
yeah,
the
yeah.
witch trials and executions. And for the families, probably for the persecutors, like
Everybody.
how
I mean,
everybody.
yeah.
Um, yeah, and so that we are now acknowledging that that's such an essential part of the healing, you know. Sinead O'Connor, who I think is an amazing prophet, there's a song called "The Famine," um, and I mean, that would have been a huge, of course, and still is, and we're talking about it finally. And that's it too. When I first started coming to Ireland 20 years ago, I'm like, is anyone talking about the famine? I would be out gathering blackberries and I would ask Gina, I'd be like, why am I the only one gathering blackberries? And she was like, because it was considered a famine food. So 140 years
Mm,
later, people were still not eating the foods. And that's all shifted too. Foraging is such a great thing here. So yeah, just the acknowledgement of it. We need to acknowledge it. And then that's where I feel like the rooted healing is going to come from. Um,
mm,
yeah. So thank you for
yeah.
sharing that story. That's as
Well,
traumatic as it is.
I
That
know.
gives me hope as well.
I know. I mean, I feel like this time, and like as I say, I feel like you are a trailblazer and a beacon of this kind of work. I really do. I just admire what you do and how you share it and the way that you share it. But this reconnecting with our stories, like with our truth and with
Yeah.
our lineage, it just feels to me like this is the essential thing that needs to happen. It's one of the things that has to happen in order for us to move
Mm,
forward,
yeah.
in
Yeah.
order for us to
Absolutely.
heal.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. Reclaim, and I love that you say story. Like, story is such a big part of it. And reclaiming the stories that are uncomfortable and that are hard, and grieving that too. Like, grieving, who knows how we were able even to grieve, you know, the women who were executed. Um,
Well, I
so
think
allowing
people had
that
to
too.
disconnect, didn't it? I mean,
Yeah. Oh
that's what I
yeah.
was come back to. I'm like, basically to
Yeah.
survive those times,
Yes.
meant to compartmentalize, meant to disconnect, meant to obviously
Hmm.
mistrust other women, to keep yourself separate from other people, to keep yourself quiet, to not stand out too much, to reject the old ways, to reject the
Yeah.
roots. Because if
Yes.
you were going to survive, and as a mother, that's what you would teach your daughters.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
if you want to survive and live a happy life, here's the blueprint, you
Mhm.
know, stay away
Yeah.
from the herbs,
Yeah, exactly.
right?
Yeah.
It's not worth it.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
don't get close to those women who are,
Mhm.
part of that.
Yeah.
It's really a thing. So for you now, like, you spend most of your time in Ireland. Is that correct?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And do you still go back to America though? Do you still keep a home base there, or?
I do. I still have a home there for now. Um I'm not really sure why, but again, I'm such a deep listener and I'm just like it's not time to and part of it is I think cuz and my beloveds and students say we need you in America still. So I think there's still work, not that I can't, we're so lucky that we can live anywhere and do our work um where we are, although and also a bit so much of um yeah, finding our belonging. So just like again, if claiming a witch helps you feel like you belong to yourself, I think that's so powerful. And I really not that I can do this, this is very much internal work. um Although if I can help people find these traditions and rituals and work with the herbs if they're inclined, to find belonging within themselves. And then the ripple effect that that will have, I think if we find belonging within ourselves and where our feet are, because Ireland and Scotland is, in your case, you're not the diaspora, you are, but those of us in America who are, and around the world who are the Irish diaspora or whatever diaspora we are, like we're not going to be able to come back, and I think the land in the States needs us to feel belonging there too.
Mm.
And if we can find belonging within ourselves through through our traditions and herbs and practices, then we can find belonging on that land and weave in. I use this idea of weaving in, you know, um, weaving in our practice, not co-opting, the Native American practices or wherever we may be, um, but weaving in um, to find that belonging.
Yeah,
Did I answer
I
your
love
question?
that because I think that's one of the challenges in all this. Obviously, so
Yeah,
many of us don't live where we're quote unquote from,
exactly. Yeah.
right? And it's like whether in this day and age we're like, are we allowed even to, embrace traditions that are not ours, or is that some sort of appropriation? Is it like, are we limited? But I love your approach 'cause I do feel like there's some sort of meeting the world where it is, or meeting people where they are, like it's not so rigid.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So can you we'll wrap this up in a minute, but I just wanted to ask you if you could share a little bit about the teaching that you do and like programs that you offer, because besides from actually doing the work of herbalism, I know that you do share some ways, and that's how I first encountered you. And by the way, that was beautiful, that tree thing. And what really sticks with me, it's funny you
Yeah.
mentioned this about finding wisdom from the Google, like not finding it from the Google. Was something really like sticks with me about that is we were walking around and there was a tree in this park that nobody really knew what it was. You probably don't even remember.
Yeah.
And I was like, let me picture this out, and like and snap a picture of it. And you're like, no, no. And I was like, oh,
Exactly. Let's just plan idea. Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah,
I've
yeah.
committed a
I know.
sacrilege
I'm so
here.
it's all right. And I mean, I'm endeavoring to let that go because I know those apps can be great. And also so much of I mean, I was very blessed to have a teacher, and I want like there to be teachers that hold this knowledge that it's not just AI and held in our fucking phones. I want us to be able to go back to the teachers who have remembered this and learned from them. Um, so then, yeah, that, and I think the apps they're great. They're a great starting point.
Well,
They are,
so
and
later when COVID struck, and with my son, I ended up homeschooling my son,
uh-huh.
and one of our projects was to name every tree in our local park
Yeah,
here in Denver.
yes,
And so we mapped out, the park, and we would go, and I would always say, like, plant snap is our last resort.
Yeah.
We would use it eventually for some of the trees because we would
Yeah.
be trying to identify it by the leaves because we didn't know the trees. We'd be
I
like
know,
kind
and
of
that's
figure it all
so
out. And at a certain point, we would say,
yeah.
"Know what that is? Should we get the plant snap out?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely. And I mean, that's it. If it's not just like consuming wise, because I talk to my students about this too. I'm like, okay, we don't have to know the name. You don't have to like do that immediately. How about just breathe with them and be with them? And, they might share a little bit about who they are. So as long as it's not, I don't know. I don't yeah, I think they're totally fine, and I love that you did that with because you were connecting with the trees, like, that's
Yeah.
amazing, and identifying the trees and, naming the trees, that's beautiful. So it can be both and. We use that term a lot, both
I
and you
love
did
that.
come to a tree class, so, yeah, so you were doing both and. Um yeah, and so going back to like the
Yeah.
idea of having a teacher, I am very blessed that I have a herbal teacher who I've been with for 22 years, and she'll be my forever teacher, not just herbal but life. Um and so I have been teaching herbal classes for, gosh, probably 18 years. And I recently changed the name of it to an apprenticeship because, so it's called Ancestral Herbal Apprenticeship. So it's coming from an Irish tradition, Irish herbs, and it's an apprenticeship. So it is not just like you're not opening a book and you are out with the plants and you're co-creating with the plants, you're listening to the plants, and it's, I mean, there are, ways that we need to work with the herbs to become community herbalists, and also it's learning to trust our intuition, learning how to listen again to the more than human realms and the plant realms, and learning to validate that. That's something that the witch trials and patriarchy and capitalism, all of it has taken away from us, that unless it's written down or unless you can source it, like
Mm.
it's not valid. So helping reclaim that. And also, I'll just say from and I also, as a longtime herbalist, the performative aspects on Instagram, people think they're a herbalist when they read somewhere that, elderberry is good for this. So anyway, yeah, so
Yes.
I know. So yeah, apprenticeship. I have a year-long apprenticeship. I have a year-long, and they're on Zoom, but I also like send everyone gets a care package every month. So they're engaging their senses. So our senses are thresholds to remembering, to learning, to deepening. So and then they spend a week on the land here with the plants that we've been talking about. And of course, they're working with them where they're living too, because a lot of these plants followed us when we went to America or went other places. Yeah.
Is that your main offering? Are you doing anything else now, like celebrating
Yeah.
like holy days or anything like that?
Yeah, I do have a program called Way of the Wild Witch, back to the witch. And that I call it Way of the Wild Witch Wheel of the Year. And that is an opportunity for us to gather 8 times out of the year. Every 6 weeks, there is a festival that we honor, whether it's astrological, like the equinoxes and solstices, or agricultural, like Beltana, Samhain, Imbolc, and Lunasa. So people can join for that, which is a ritual and tradition experience. And then I have a year-long program. It's a mystery school, and it is we come from the lens of Irish mythology and we look at mythology, and I think most traditions do, although I never want to speak for other traditions because I don't know really. So in Ireland, our mythology is like still lives within us. And so by reading the mythology, again, we can reclaim and remember who we are. We can remember our sovereignty outside of all the you know suppression of modernity. So we work with myth and herbs as well. Work with herbs from more of a spiritual perspective, but still from a very sensory perspective to open those pathways to remembering and reclaiming. And then they spend, and also that the mystery school is very much about coming back into relationship with belonging with the land. So we're doing a lot of work with the land and the ancestors, the more than human realms. And then
Mm,
they spend a week here as well. So yeah, so
amazing.
those are three things. Yeah.
Amazing. And you also have this lovely, if you sign up for your email list, you receive a lovely little offering, daily offering, don't you? I just love those.
Oh yeah,
And in
thank
my inbox.
you.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
I,
generous.
yeah, it's so special. It's really a lovely and delightful service. You are tending your community. Thank you
Aw,
so much,
yeah,
I really
yeah.
appreciate it.
Thank
So
you.
to wrap this up, I always ask people this, but if there's like one thing that you could teach everyone in the world, if you could impart something, what would it be?
Oh gosh, right?
Mm,
Yeah. My TED Talk would be, I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah.
I mean, I am so passionate about this beautiful, humble weed called nettle. So
Mm,
I honestly, I feel like if those of us from the West who grew up, where I grew up, white people from the West, nettle would change us. Like the gifts that herb brings, from like the vitamins and minerals, the spiritual, the metaphysical, the connecting. And it's a weed. It grows everywhere. And so yeah, I would just want the world to know about nettle. And I
that's
honestly,
amazing because I'm like that typical Scottish person, like nettles, run the other direction. My kids are all like, nettles. And it's like because they grow like, I mean, like
oh yeah,
insane in Scotland, I mean,
yes.
everywhere. So
Yeah,
that's
and that's like
interesting.
the herbs, and I don't want to be anthropomorphic around this. And my teacher has always said that the herbs you need will show up. And we just, we and they are but the sting even has healing properties. The sting has healing properties. So just this idea, if we could shift our perspective on something that we, you know have not liked or demonized, or have looked at like just a nuisance, um how we could the ripple effect that could have. So
Mm,
yeah,
I'm going to
I
explore
know.
nettle. You've given me this is like totally firing things up at me. I'm going to explore nettle.
Yeah.
Thank you so much
Thank you.
for having this chat with me. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it and how much I appreciate your work. I really love it. And I'm just grateful for you and what you embody and what you share. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Diane. It was great. It was a pleasure.
And,